In this video, we're going to take a look at what the data actually looks like. So I created a database with different Pokemon in it. For you Pokemon buffs, I only put in the original 151 Pokemon just because it's a lot of data. So if you want to go ahead and go to the GitHub repository, and if you haven't already downloaded it, download pokedex.db. So click into it, hit download. I've already downloaded it. Once it downloads, you can go ahead and, let's see, copy that or move it into your main folder. And let's see here. Actually, what I'm going to do, just to make sure we're everything's the same as the repository on GitHub, I'm going to create a new folder called API, and I'm going to move everything except for the Pokedex DB into that folder. And let's see. Okay, so this is our database here. This is a SQLite database, which means there's one file that contains the entire database. You can just as easily use a different database dialect, MySQL, Postgres, SQL Server, MariaDB. For this project, actually, those are the only ones that will work. But for our purposes, we're going to use SQLite just because it's simpler. So now you can open that SQLite, let's see, database, browser, where is it? SQLite, where I downloaded it. Okay, so you can go ahead and open DB browser for SQLite. Now, what you'll actually have to do, for me, it wasn't showing up in the start menu. So I actually had to go into my C drive, go to program files, and find DB browser for SQLite. So what I'm going to do is just right click on this and click pin to start. That way it shows up. Let's see, DB. And there it is, DB browser for SQLite. And this is how we're going to view our data. Oops. And this is how we're going to view our data. So if you go ahead and click Open Database and navigate to your Pokedex DB file and just hit Open. Okay, so in this first tab, database structure, this tells you all the tables. So if you're unfamiliar with how databases work, imagine this is Microsoft Excel or Google Sheets, and each one of these is a separate sheet. If we go to, so I'll just give you a brief rundown. We have Pokemon. That's just the basic Pokemon, but then each table has different information about them. So moves stores all the different possible types of moves for all Pokemon. Pokemon moves assigns different moves to different Pokemon. And then trainers are basically users. I called it trainers because that's what they're called in Pokemon. But when we start creating our authentication for people to be able to log in, that's where it's going to be stored. So now if we go over to browse data, here it shows what tables selected. So let's go ahead and select Pokemon. And this gives us all the Pokemon. I'm going to make this bigger so it's easier to see. So here we have an ID. This corresponds with the actual official number for each Pokemon. Bulbasaur is number 1. The name of the Pokemon, picture. Now this is actually a URL to a picture that I took from bulbagarden.net. And then the height, the height in inches, the weight in pounds, a description of the Pokemon. You can actually see the full value over here a little easier. And then here's just some basic data about them. I'm not going to go through all of them, but you can take a look as you want. One thing I will point out is that there's a created, modified, and deleted column. So this is just when, this is the number of milliseconds since January 1st, 1970, which is the start of Unix time. This is the number of milliseconds since that date that it was created. It's a little confusing, but basically don't worry about what it actually is. We can convert this to a date, an actual date in our code. And then if it ever gets deleted, so that's when it's created. This was if it ever gets modified, when it was modified, and if ever it gets deleted, rather than delete the record from the table itself, we're just going to set this to whatever date, and we'll have something set up in our code that it won't, whatever row was supposedly deleted won't get returned in our data. So it's effectively deleted, but the data is still there if we ever need to revive it. So that's Pokemon. Like I said, you can look at moves. Right now, I don't have anything in here, but that's just because it takes a lot to get that in here. Evolutions is an interesting one. So this has the Pokemon ID. So Pokemon ID 1, you can see that ID in the Pokemon table. So that's Bulbasaur. And then evolution ID, this is the Pokemon that it evolves into. So number 2, if we go over to Pokemon, so Bulbasaur is number 1, and it evolves into number 2, which is Ivysaur. And Ivysaur will evolve into Venusaur. Venusaur does not evolve into Charmander. That's not how it works if you're not familiar with Pokemon. So that tells us what Pokemon evolve into which. So Bulbasaur evolves into Ivysaur, 1 into 2, 2 into 3, and then we skip 4 evolves into 5, and so on and so forth. The reason we use IDs, if you're unfamiliar with database structure, relational database structure, is so that we don't have to duplicate data. We already know, we already have a place in our database that stores the name Bulbasaur. So in our evolutions table, we don't need to put Bulbasaur here. We just reference the ID where that corresponds to that Pokemon in the Pokemon table. So that's just the basics. Again, this data could be anything. I chose to do Pokemon. You could make this data anything. And so yeah, if you just want to take a look at the different tables here, again, some of them are don't have a lot of data, or they might even be empty, like moves. And you can populate that if you know anything about Pokemon, or you could just make it up. So go ahead and take a look at that, and I'll see you in the next video.